Welcome back to the Balancing Act podcast. I'm Andy Tempty. On the Balancing Act, we talk to business leaders, industry experts to explore the balancing acts we play in our professional lives and learn about the events that put rocket boosters behind their career success. Today, we have Doug Howarth joining us. Doug is the CEO and founder of Hypernomics. He's an author, inventor, and entrepreneur. His company's proprietary patented software aids businesses and institutions in market identification, pricing, and product market fit. We're going to tap into Doug's vast experience to discuss key future-facing skills relating to finance, data, and strategic pricing. Welcome to the show, Doug.
Well, Dr. Tempty, thank you so much for having me. I hope I can live up to all that. Thank you.
Oh, I'm sure you will. Doug, before we get started, I ask all my guests this question. Please give us the 2-minute version of your story.
Well, the 2-minute version of how I got here was that I went to school, studied economics, and was getting sick the whole time, which we'll talk about a little bit later. And I had this long-standing condition. Studied economics, graduated with honors, but I never quite believed it. Dropped out of graduate school. And then 3 decades after I got out of school, I made a discovery listening to my wife by a washing machine of all things. I realized she was doing it in 4 dimensions. And so I ran off and built a tool that could plot in 4 dimensions. And that's kind of led me down the path to all the discoveries that Hypernomics has made to date and is making throughout its history, and it continues to make month to month.
Well, I think that's a great lesson for everybody. 3 decades is a long time to most people who are listening to this show, and
right.
Then all of a sudden there is this light bulb moment. So is that our quintessential "it's never too late" story?
Yeah, I would say so. It's you hope when you're in school and you're in graduate school that you can make a contribution to the field that you're in. And when I left it, as I dropped out of graduate school twice actually, I said, well, I'm never going to write in this field ever, because I don't know what's going on. I didn't believe what they were telling me. And I thought what they were telling me was correct. Well, the other side of that is, well, what if it wasn't correct? And it turns out that it wasn't. And these are the discoveries that I've been able to make, in my 50s and 60s. So that's pretty interesting.
Awesome. Always be curious, always be asking questions. Doug, if you had to pick one event in your life that put rocket boosters behind your career, is it that washing machine moment, or was there something else?
Well, the thing that enabled me to see the washing machine moment was when my best friend, Tim Schreiner, gave me a kidney. Tim's right here. He's in my front pocket. That's where they put kidneys now. I had kidney disease since I was 17. And back in the 70s, when I discovered this, was potentially a death sentence. And so my body was going downhill for decades. And the blood count was getting worse and worse. And then in January of 2001, Tim gave me this kidney. And all of a sudden, or 2002, excuse me, all of a sudden, my brain just cleared. It was like going downhill for decades, and all of a sudden, boom, I could think in ways I couldn't think before. And so that was the moment that basically allowed me to see the 4-dimensional systems that I could never see before. So that was the incident that you're looking for. That was the point in time where my life changed. So it was pretty spectacular. Wow. And, for those of your listeners that have a chance to be an organ donor, it's what a wonderful gift to somebody when you can let them live the way in which they couldn't live before. That's pretty spectacular.
Now, that is a fantastic rocket booster story. We have not had one of those on the show, so thank you so much for that. Let's dive into your book, Hypernomics: Using Hidden Dimensions to Solve Unseen Problems. Can you give us the elevator pitch for what Hypernomics is, and what's the main takeaway for readers?
The main takeaway is that, when you're introduced to economics, you talked about you're introduced to the law of supply and demand, where you've got this upward sloping supply curve and a downward sloping demand curve, and they intersect at one point. You're told that's equilibrium. And there's a reason that came around. I mean, you can imagine back in the 1700s, there's only one price for iron ore, and there's only maybe one price for bread in town. But iron goes, for example, into aircraft. And last we looked, I just put a paper out about this, there's 95 business aircraft that are doing just fine. And it turns out that what happens here is that instead of the law of supply and demand being in effect, there's something we call the law of value and demand, which basically says that the product features determine value. Value drives price. Price limits quantity sold. Quantity sold is a feature. So what we have then is a value space on one side of an arrangement, a 4D arrangement, and a demand plane on the other. And they form ordered quads that we can plot, and then we can observe, and then if we need to, we can manipulate them in the ways in which we can either do stock market buys, position new products for sale, adjust existing prices, make different demand forecasts. So it has a lot of potential to it, a lot of ways in which it can be used. So it's pretty powerful stuff.
Yeah, I thank you for focusing our attention on the word value, because so often we get wrapped into the price of something, and as economists, I was trained in the same way that the demand and supply curves, they intersect. That's your equilibrium price, done, dusted, right?
Right.
No, there's this whole value equation, and I like to talk about value frequently on this show because, thinking about individuals showing up at work, what value am I helping to create today? And it's just it's a real mindset shift, thinking about value versus the normal equilibrium that we've been thinking about.
Yeah, and the insight that basically launched the particular thing is this washing machine that I was talking about. And I realized my wife and I were out buying a washing machine, and we stroll up to this one, and she says, the one we have at home is never a very big drum. I'd like to have more room for the clothes. And I thought capacity versus price. I go, there's a two-dimensional problem. And then she said, we only have one delicate cycle at home. I want more cycles. And I thought, cycles, capacity, price, that's the 3D problem. And then we saw the next machine up the line. It was a little bit more expensive. And I liked it. And she said, what about this one? She says, that's too expensive. We can't afford it. And I said to myself, then I realized that we were going to add one unit to all the units that were going to be purchased of this machine over the course of the year. So we were part of that supply, that quantity element here. We were going to add a quantity of one to the total quantity sold. And so I realized that we were part of the quantity price relationship. So we were part of a capacity, cycles, price, and quantity relationship. That's 4 dimensions. And I looked around the store, and I realized that everybody in every part of that store, looking at all these various products, was doing the same thing in their head simultaneously. And it turns out that what people do, this is the great thing about it, is that people self-aggregate their behaviors in ways in which we can describe it. Not to say everything comes down to a point or a line, but they're within a kind of a big elliptical or a mass of responses that we can actually characterize. And it's the characterization of those responses that forms the basis for hypernomics.
Yeah, we live in a 3-dimensional world, and so it's very difficult for us to think about what 4, 5, 6 dimensions it actually is. But you're telling us and confirming that in this fantastic thing that lives between our ears, we do all sorts of subconscious calculations that take us beyond beyond the normal confines of the three-dimensional world that we live in.
Yeah, the other thing to think about, I mean, all your students that took algebra in school, and when you had algebra, you might have had the old two-dimensional thing, had X going this way and Y going that way. But the thing about that is this might look like this is going east and west. This might be looking like it's going up and down. But the thing of it is that can be any angle that it wants to be. It's a mathematical system. It's not glued to the physical surroundings that are part of the classroom that you're in. It's its own universe. And that's the important thing here. These are mathematical dimensions or market dimensions that we're talking about. They're not physical dimensions. They're mathematical.
Yeah. Awesome. So in our nearly 150 episodes of this show, we have yet to talk about strategic pricing, which is a big miss on my part because strategic pricing is such an important part of any business. But many companies don't invest in performing strategic pricing and value analysis. They opt instead, they lick their thumb, stick it in the air, and guess at what their price should be. Can you talk to our listeners about the benefits of making the time and expending the resources to engage in formal pricing and value analysis? Why should a leader engage with a company like yours, Hypernomics, to assist in this work?
Yeah, that's got a really good example of that, Dr. Tempty. There was the seventh employee of Microsoft, a guy named Vern Rayburn, decided to go to Albuquerque in the early 2000s, Albuquerque, New Mexico. He was going to build himself a brand new, very small business jet. It was going to seat 5 or 6 people. It was going to go 400 and some miles an hour and had a 1,400 mile range. And so without doing any strategic pricing, he thought, well, I'm going to build, because he built computers before, I'm going to build this plane like I built computers. I'm just going to crank them out. I'm going to have a big assembly line. And he pushed this plane out the door. Its original price was $775,000. Now, my analysis suggested it was worth more than $2 million, which is to say the chance that he had that price rate right was less than 5%. Now, he eventually had to raise the price. All of a sudden, he gets this big flood of orders. He got more orders for that plane for, potentially for a decade's worth of sales that had been, 3 times what anybody else was making for a jet. And he couldn't he couldn't make a profit at the price that he posted, even though he gradually increased the price. He started out too low and the enterprise went bankrupt. Now, had he done strategic price analysis with all the other objects that were available for sale there, so turboprops that were going slower, bigger business jets that were going faster, even smaller still planes than his, ones that were much bigger, he'd find that there's a response for cabin volume and speed that creates a price response that he could have had, that he could have known had he taken the time to do it, but he didn't take the time to do it. So that turned out to be a huge problem for him.
Yeah. Well, just again to reinforce the point, I have lived in businesses. I've been one of those leaders with lick their thumb, stick it in the air. Oh, the price should be $300 without making the time to do that work, and it is really value-adding work to the bottom line and future success of your business. Doug, let's shift gears just a little bit because pricing and value analysis, they rely on a strong foundation of data analysis skills.
Sure.
And obviously, there's a need for deep expertise and the use of consultants, but I think that all team members, regardless of department in 2024 and beyond, need some baseline understanding of the data that their company generates, their team, themselves individually, and how it's used. So let's run a quick thought experiment. You have a corporate CEO sitting in front of you right now. What advice do you give them to build data literacy skills across their teams?
Well, I tell them, I said, you've probably gathered a whole bunch of data on your own company, but have you taken the time to figure out the relationship of the data as you change one feature to another? Do you know how the costs rise as you make a product bigger or if you make a product faster? So when you figure out in your own company, after you do that, how the costs change if you make something, like say you're building boats, make a bigger boat, an ocean liner costs more than a power boat. There's a relationship between size and the price. A canoe doesn't sell for as much as a power boat. There's a relationship of speed and size in these boats relative to the cost. And then you want to go out and retrieve what these value prospects would be for that particular product. So again, if you're looking at boats, there's a certain value to the displacement that you have, and then a certain value to the speed that you're offering. And if you don't take the time to figure out the difference between that cost and your value, you can go off and make a product that doesn't make the optimal profit for you, or even worse, makes a product that could go bankrupt. And you don't want to do that for your company. You don't want to go bankrupt because you didn't take, the few man months that it would typically take to assemble this at the beginning of a project. People, I came from aerospace. People would spend tens or hundreds of millions, maybe even low billions of dollars in development doing something, not figuring out if there's a market for the product. And if you don't do all the analysis, you could end up with a product that won't sell. So Clayton Christensen, the professor at Harvard, said that 95% of all new product ideas fail. Well, probably a good hunk of them because people didn't do the analysis going in. So it's our hope that the 95% fail, it means 5% succeed. It's our hope that people start, understanding hypernomics and they go from 5% success rate to 6 to 7 to 8. And if that could happen over the course of a few years, the economy would be much better off, and people that are using this technique would find themselves making money more often and being profitable.
Yeah.
And helping out their stakeholders.
Yeah, I think if we educate more of the population of the company of the companies that we're building about the uses of data, they'll be more creative. They'll ask more questions that will then lead to better results for everybody. So
yeah, precisely.
Yeah. So, Doug, we're going to take a quick break for a really short commercial. We'll be right back.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Has trust broken down in your organization? Learn how smooth workflows enable accountability and unlock trust to create long-term business success. Learn more in my new book, The Balanced Business, available today at Amazon.com and wherever books are sold. And we're back with Doug Howarth talking about multidimensional economics, data literacy, strategic pricing, and product market fit. Doug, I grew up in the world of economics and finance, so I naturally lean into conversations about supply and demand, market analysis, value, all of that. I know I'm an outlier. Most team members, their eyes glaze over when topics of data, economics, and finance are discussed. They've been taught by societal conventional wisdom that finance and economics is just too hard. So let's continue that thought experiment, but shift it just a little bit. You've now got a superintendent of schools sitting right in front of you. What advice do you have for them to make economics and finance training a higher priority in our high schools?
Well, I'd probably say that, Mr. Superintendent or Mrs. Superintendent, a good deal of your students as they go forward, if life were to continue the way it is right now, many of them aren't going to be financially well late into their adulthood. Now, why is that? Well, they haven't been given the financial literacy that you could give them right now that would help them figure what they need to do as they move forward. And I would say, it's a little self-serving, but it's actually true that hypernomics would start to reveal to people what and how the markets work and show them what you can do for yourself to make your future better based on your understanding of what's going to happen in a market if you try to place a product in it, place yourself in it. If you're in the market for labor, what happens for that? So it's a new technique, but it's it's one that everybody participates in already. So what I like to tell people is that Hypernomics takes what you already know and reassembles it into something that you need to know to succeed.
Do you think that how approachable could that be to a high school student? Let's say, are they already thinking in multi dimensions, but just don't know it yet? And how easy would that be to translate for a high school student?
Well, I think it'd be pretty easy. I can tell you that the book's written, my book, Hypernomics, Using Hidden Dimensions to Solve Unseen Problems, that's written to an 11th grade level. But one of the things that I discovered after the book was I got done with a run one day and I was looking down on the asphalt and I saw a little tiny ant moving about, a little reddish black. They call them rock ants. And it was starting to go in a counterclockwise fashion. It made one complete circle and then it was out just a little bit further than it was before. And then it made another circle and this guy's stopping and fits and starts. And I got down a little bit closer and looked at this guy. And when he would stop, he was on for him was a high point. It was a little high pebble on the asphalt. And then I realized that as I got done with that, I go, this guy is doing reconnaissance. So I raced home and I did ant reconnaissance and hit it into the search bar. And sure enough, these ants that have been around for 140 million years or more go out and survey new places to live. They want to have places that are spacious and dry, and have the right ceiling height, and they're close to food, but away from the neighbors. And so if that doesn't sound like how you and I shop for houses, I don't know what that is. So if the ant's doing this, I certainly a high school kid can do it. So that's how I would sell it to them. I said, look, the ants are doing this already. You're doing it. You just don't know it. This is actually revealing to you the forces that you are working with and against, so that you can actually make better decisions. That's what I would tell them.
Yeah, I think I would just augment that by saying to the superintendent to make the problems that economics and finance can solve much more approachable, experiential, fun. You know, your ant story is once you listen to it and you go, oh yeah, that's a lot of fun to think about the world like that versus the dry, boring. Here's a bunch of formulas that we want you to memorize that you'll never use again.
Exactly. Yeah. It's the world of practicability. It's how people actually engage the world. And this is what we're trying to instill in people is that you're doing this already every day. We're going to show you how to actually pull the layers apart so that you can figure out what you're doing compared to everybody else, that you can make your way in the world more effectively.
Awesome. Well, Doug, I want to geek out for just a moment. I'm a finance professor by training. You've done some work in the stock market. You've used Hypernomics as a stock market prediction tool. Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about the results that you're seeing, and without revealing the secret sauce, what differentiates Hypernomics from all the other stock and portfolio selection tools that are out there?
Well, what we did, Dr. Tempte, is back in February 2020, I put together a pool of my own money. We call it the Hypernomics Fund. And I got to tell everybody it's not for sale, so the SEC doesn't come down.
You can't invest in this.
You can't invest in this yet, no. But so we put together this fund. I put together this fund, and we started using Hypernomics to figure out stocks that were undervalued based on their features. So a feature of a stock would be its dividends, its return on assets, its book value, debt to equity ratio, all that kind of stuff. And so what we figured out was a series of ways to analyze these stocks over time to figure out if they're undervalued. And then we worked out, an algorithm that says, when do you buy and when do you sell? And so long story short, inside of 50 months, we went from an index of 1, we indexed ourselves against the S&P 500 and Berkshire Hathaway. We went from an index of 1 to an index of 2 in 50 months. And so our internal rate of return at that time peaked at 15%. It's down a little bit from that, but it went at 15% over 50 months. And at that time, we were 1.9 times doing 1.9 times as well as the S&P 500, only buying S&P 500 stocks, only going long, and not taking any options or anything like that. Never shorting. And we're doing 1.2 times as well as Berkshire Hathaway. And so what they call there's a test that you can do for this. You probably know it's the students t-test, where we worked out the chance of the chance of this coming about due to chance, and it was less than 1 in 1 quadrillion. It was there were 200 zeros for the answer. So we did it basically as I wanted to see if I could make some money, but we did it as a test to see if the theory works. And long story short, it works.
Awesome. Well, let's close out the show with having some fun. A couple of lightning round questions for you. Number one, I put you in a time machine. You can send a really short message to an earlier version of yourself. What's the message, and what previous version do you send it to?
Well, I figured this out. As I said, Dr. Tempty, in my 50s, I would have liked to have that message back 40 years ago. So I'd be a younger man talking to you now. So I'd say, hey, guess what, Doug? There's this whole new field that you can discover if you just make this one observation. It would have been nice to make that one observation 40 years ago. But, it came when it came. But with the time machine, I would have gone back 40 years. And instead of being 69 in front of you right now, I'd be 29 telling you what I'm doing. So that's what I would do.
So, second question, we're all works in progress. What are you focused on right now in your personal journey of growth?
Well, I'm focused on trying to get this out into the world. It's a new idea. It challenges modern economic theory. And as you know, some people are entrenched in their ideas. They went to school, as you did, for a long time. And they don't want to see new things. And what I'm trying to do is to get the people that can see new things to see it and start to adopt it. So I think what will happen is even though I'm fairly old, I think the young people are going to start picking this up as they're starting to pick it up now and start to pick it up more frequently. My goal is to try to improve the arc of hypernomics going forward, because it helps not only businesses and people, it can help out governments in the entire world at the same time. So I also see this knocking down the cycles we have in business, which is to say the 2008 financial crash. Had this stuff been in place for the 20 years prior to that, people wouldn't have let it happen. And a whole bunch of stuff that happened during COVID, where the money supply grew, in my view, way too quickly, that probably wouldn't happen either. This tool, properly used, will start to reduce the frequency of crashes and falls, and it will dampen the amplitude of crashes and falls. So I'm trying to get that out in the world to make the world a better place.
Excellent. So Doug, what's next, and where can people learn more about you and Hypernomics?
Well, I'm hoping, Dr. Tempty, to get a second edition of the book out. I got the first one out. People can get a hold of me at my personal website, doughowarth.com, but we do more work through our company website, which is hypernomics.com. There's a info at hypernomics.com. You can write me there, or you can write me at dhowarth at hypernomics.com. And you can look at my LinkedIn page. I've got several very interesting vignettes about how the market works in my LinkedIn posts. So I would encourage people to go out there, and kind of gives you a flavor in just a couple of minutes of all the various aspects of this big tool.
Excellent. Well, thank you for taking our listeners down the road a bit of learning what you're up to and what Hypernomics is all about. And especially the time that we spent on strategic pricing. It was a real, no pun intended, a real value add.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Dr. Tempty. I really appreciate being on your show. Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you, Doug. My name is Andy Tempty. This is the Balancing Act podcast. You can find us on all the major streaming services. Please like, subscribe, rate, and most importantly, share this public good with your friends and your colleagues. We'll see you next time on the Balancing Act. The show was produced by Nicholas Tempty.